Cat House. Welcome to week 1 of One Book July 2020 Read Along. This year we are reading The One Thing by Gary Keller. And this week I'm going to talk about just the introduction. Now I wanted to give everybody a heads up, especially week 2, which is the second section of the book. It's a bit long, so you guys don't feel like you have to stick to kind of the same schedule that I'm using. If you want to split up the chapters evenly throughout the month, if that works better for you, by all means do it, okay? I don't want anybody to feel like you have to stick to the schedule I'm using just because I'm using it. So let's talk about section 1 of The One Thing. It had 3 chapters in it. Chapter 1 is called The One Thing, chapter 2 is called The Domino Effect, and chapter 3 is Success Leaves Clues. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the notes that I made. If you guys would like to join in the discussion, as always, you can comment down below. There is also a One Thing read-along group for One Book July 2020. It is in the Band app. I have a link to that both on my website in the One Book July 2020 introductory post, and it's also in the link tree in my bio on Instagram, and I will also put it in the blog post that goes with this video and in the description box down below as well. So if you want to kind of chat throughout the week, by all means join that group, come join the discussion. There's quite a few people in there already. We're having a really good time. So chapter 1 of The One Thing. This is where the author starts talking about how focusing on only one thing yields the best results. He was running a company and was really, had a lot of success for a long time, and then was very much starting to struggle. So he hired a coach, and the coach said, here are the 14 people I have found, positions that you need to replace. So what he did was, the author stepped down, he left his job and made that his primary focus, was finding those 14 people. And he said after doing that, his company saw 40% growth every year for almost 10 years. So by focusing on that one thing, he really kind of opened up their potential for growth and success. And one of the quotes he uses in chapter 1 is, what one thing can you do this week such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary? And that was something that he started asking the people who worked for him. They'd have a meeting every week and they'd kind of outline a handful of things that they needed to get done that week, and invariably none of it would get done. So then he's like, okay, how about 3 things? Can we do 3 things that would, move us forward? And invariably at least a couple of those things wouldn't get done. So then he's like, okay, what one thing, if there's one thing you can do this week that'll make everything else that you need to do a lot easier or not necessary to do at all, do that one thing. What is that one thing? He says, one of the biggest keys that we all tend to miss, and I'm very guilty of this, is go small. We're always like, go big or go home, right? And we've done that one year for a One Book July theme. But he says going small, which means only do what you should do, means also that not all things matter equally. It's connecting what you do with what you want, and that results are directly determined by how narrow you can make that focus. So that's what he means by going small, is narrowing your focus. So the narrower you can make that focus, the better your results will be. And as I was reading this, I got thinking about, he starts talking about your time and energy. Like, everybody has a finite amount of time and energy. And I started thinking about, if time and energy were tangible things, right? If time and energy were cotton balls. It just popped in my head. So if time and energy were cotton balls, if I had a bucket of cotton balls and that represented my time and my energy for a day, and I spilled them all out on my table, and each cotton ball became a task, each cotton ball became something I needed to do, I would have one layer of cotton balls, right? And I may not ever get to each one of those cotton balls, okay? But if I take all of that time and energy and put it into the bucket, instead of spreading it out, if I take all that time and energy, put it all into one bucket, look how deep that pile of cotton balls would become, right? So I'm able to achieve a lot more depth in what I'm doing, which is, for me at least, going to increase my focus. It's going to increase my creativity because I have focused everything into one spot. So instead of having everything spread out all thin, I can achieve depth instead. And that was my big takeaway from chapter 1 of this, is trying to maintain that depth once you find it. Chapter 2, he talks about the domino effect, and this one made me laugh because Liam loves watching dominoes videos, and there have been some really cool videos where they start with a small domino and they end up toppling something that's like stories high, made of plywood. Started with one domino. So I saw this and I got all excited. He talks about, you know, dominoes falling when they're all the same size is a linear progression. But physics shows that when you take a domino and knock down a domino that's 50% larger than the first, and then that one knocks down a domino that's 50% larger than that one, and so on and so forth, you can create so much energy that you can, starting with that one domino, you can create so much energy that you can knock down humongous things. It creates a lot of energy, and it's called the geometric progression. So it's the cumulative effects of one small domino knocking down progressively larger dominoes. One of the quotes he says is, every day, line up your priorities, find the lead domino, and whack away at it until it falls, which I think is really brilliant. And I have, you know, these pictures in my head from watching these videos with Liam of these, you know, starting with one small domino and being able to, over time, tackle that huge thing. Now, because I have created that depth that we talked about in chapter 1, getting to that next progressive larger and larger thing becomes easier and easier and more enjoyable because I've achieved depth to it. He also talks about success being sequential. So it does start, if you think about it as dominoes, it does start with one domino and then the next domino, but it becomes geometric over time. So the more time that you put into doing something with depth, because you've focused yourself instead of spreading yourself out too thin, over time your results will also grow. You know, like that idea of a 50% larger domino and a 50% larger domino, your results can look the same. And then chapter 3, he talks about success leaving clues, and he gives several anecdotes in here. He talks about one product or one service. So he talks about, you know, Coors or KFC, or, you know, companies that have one product, one service. That is their one focus. That is what they do. He also talks about several people who have told stories about the one person in their life who was very influential or very supportive and, you know, consistently helped them kind of move on to that next step. One passion or one skill in this one, because you guys know that that's, you know, if you've been around here for any amount of time, that's kind of where my interest really lies, is, you know, what is your passion, what is your skill, what's your why not, you know, what's your one thing that you really, really want to do. And one of the quotes he uses when he's talking about one passion or one skill is, often the line between passion and skill can be blurry. That's because they're almost always connected. And that's where, you know, we talk a lot about do what you love, right? If you can tap into the thing that you really love doing. And I can't say that this works across the board. We know several people, and I've done it myself, who, you know, you turn your hobby into a business and suddenly you really don't enjoy it anymore. Ryder Carroll tells a great story about that in the bullet journal method. So, but a lot of times it is hard to delineate between a passion that you may have and a skill that you may possess, because a lot of times they're connected in some way or they're the same thing. Okay? And then the last thing that I will leave you with today is this linear progression that he talks about of, you have a passion because it's something you're passionate about and you enjoy, that leads you to practice that passion. The more you practice it, the more your skill increases. The more your skill increases, you start to see better results. The better the results that you see, the more you enjoy it, which means you have more passion for it, which means you may put more time into that thing because your passion for it is growing, which cycles you back around to the beginning where you turn your passion into even more practice. This reminds me a lot of the concept of 10,000 hours, at taking 10,000 hours to become a professional at something, and how if you can really laser focus yourself on that something, what that something is, rather than spreading yourself too thin, you achieve that depth. That I know for me, when I can get that depth, that makes a lot of kind of the extraneous stuff that might go with doing some of these things that I tend to put off, the stuff I'll procrastinate on because it has to do with something I enjoy. It's stuff I have to do, but it's the parts of it that I don't want to do. If I can laser focus myself on that passion for it and attain that depth for it, I don't so much mind the parts of it that are kind of humdrum. So that is really it. Kind of a short video this week. I didn't know how many people were starting July on the Monday versus Wednesday, since July 1st was technically Wednesday this week. So I wanted to stick to just the intro section this week in case some people weren't starting until Wednesday. Also for the fact that I know people are waiting for books to arrive as well. So I hope you were enjoying reading The One Thing. I definitely am. Please feel free to join us in the Band app. You can also use it on your laptop or desktop through your browser. I'll put the link for that down below and in the blog post. And again, it's in the bio in my Instagram account as well. So I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all enjoying reading The One Thing. I hope you're all enjoying your one book for One Book July. And I will be in the Band app chatting to you guys about all this. And then I will also be back next week for another video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.